is in response to the people out there who say, oh, Earth is just perfect for life. Oh, what a haven in all the universe, just right. It's not just right.
So this is
Every opportunity it gets, it tries to kill us. Add it up. The tsunamis, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the asteroids, the 3/4 of the Earth. If I drop you butt naked, you're dead 10 minutes later. Because something eats you, okay?
So this is the anti-Gaia hypothesis?
Anti-Gaia, yeah. Earth is bad for life. And evidence of that is, look at the fossil record. 99% of all species that ever lived are now extinct. That is not the signature of a planet that is in love with life.
There is a bit of a different beginning to this 31st episode of An Atheist, a Believer, and a Pastor Walk into a Bar. Still Neil deGrasse Tyson, of course, in one of his stranger moods, but this time I think there's a very good argument against those that believe that God created the earth. I think this is very fair to expect an explanation to that claim. So what is the argument in defense of the claim that God did in fact create the earth, the heavens, the sun, our existence, all the animals and insects, even those that killed children, weather patterns, water, the oceans, the whole bit? So I want to find out tonight if there's any validity to the question, why would God make such a dangerous place for us all to live? Let's think about that for a minute and ponder what Neil deGrasse Tyson was saying. Did God make such an uninhabitable planet for us to live on, or have we got that all wrong? Tonight, we will get two very different perspectives. The atheist experience is that it appears that we just happen to be living on a planet due to a process of evolution. How it started, we're unsure. No one knows. From a Christian perspective, this is all God's doing. Or are they, in fact, saying something totally different than that? Luckily, we have a team. When I say team, there's three of us. We started out as five. We've lost a couple of members who are determined, the people, to dig down to try and find a logical explanation. And we want to get you to put your 2 bobs worth in. That means tell us what you think in Australian. G'day and welcome. I'm your host, Peter, representing this live podcast on YouTube. Great to have your company on this 7th day of August already, believe it or not, 2024.
No, you've gone silent, Rowie.
But I think the problem is
it's muted. I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just disappears, and I can't see it myself because I'm reading. Where was I up to?
7th day of August.
Aha. Right,
2024.
2024. Where were we? Yes. Watching us on YouTube. Yep, great to have your company. On this 7th day of August 2024, just gone 8 o'clock. Australian Western Standard Time, broadcasting from Perth, Western Australia. At the moment, you are watching on YouTube and only on YouTube. If you haven't already, can I please ask you to follow us on the Atheist Believer and Pastor Walk into a Bar podcast on Facebook? Pretty please. When we get up to, I'm just going to check again, make sure I'm still on. Yes, I am. That's wonderful. This is crazy. When we get up to 100 followers, we can then start broadcasting again on Facebook like we used to. It will, however, of course, be played after we finish tonight. You can watch it on Facebook, the replay. Tonight, I want to ask the question, if there is a God, why did he make Earth so inhospitable? To help me navigate this very, very interesting quandary, the rest of the panel, which includes Richard Stalls. Luke is being a good dad tonight, looking after the kiddlywinks, plus non-believer number 1, Jason Jordan, and the other is myself. Suresh is helping his lovely wife blow out birthday candles tonight. Welcome, gents.
G'day, Robbie.
How do?
I think this is going to be a very intriguing discussion. For Jace and I, it's relatively easy because we're not making any claim other than to say that we can't possibly see how the earth is the best work of an almighty, loving God. For Rich, I think he has his work cut out for him tonight, but he can handle it. He's got broad shoulders. However, As he is far more experienced in the book making the claims, I'll assume he has some great explanations for us. Rich, we can kick off with you if you like. And just before you do that, don't forget, if you're at home, a reminder, we absolutely love it when you get involved. So tell us what you think about the discussion tonight. Rich, the world is yours, my friend.
Whew. Well, where do I start? Maybe the beginning. In the beginning. I guess that's where we're starting, is the tension between the claim of those opening words of Genesis and the world we see around us. It's interesting because before I get to actually what I see things as personally, but it's probably interesting to know where I came from in my belief systems, which is similar to, I guess, a lot of, for want of a better word, evangelical Christians. We don't tend to call ourselves evangelical here in Australia. We're more like Baptists and Anglicans, and but that sort of that more modernish kind of Christian. I don't know if Rowie, when you were in the church, whether you ever come across the Creation Science Foundation Answers in Genesis, Dr. Ken Ham. Any of those amazing folk? But that's what I was brought up on, which was a very literalistic understanding of what the Bible is saying, and that everything, not just the claims about science, but everything that the Bible so-called said could be squared up with science if we understood the science right. And if we couldn't square things up, it means that we just weren't thinking hard enough. And there might, if we could tap our head and do the sort of thing hard enough, we'd finally squint and redefine some words. We'd get it all squared away. And so that's sort of where I came from. And so I do understand that world very deeply. The only problem is that you have to come up with some really weird explanations. They range from, I'm trying to draw up the memories, they range from things such as, where you look around the world and it looks like the world is really, really, really old in all the ways you look at it. And, we can sort of fudge some numbers here and there to try and get that, but you're not going to get it down to the around about 10,000 years old that a literalistic reading of the Bible requires. And so you come up with some ideas that range from wholesale scientific fraud, like a nice global conspiracy theory that scientists are so godlessly corrupt that they're in a sort of a pact together to deceive the people, or so it's either the scientists are deceiving us, or the one that probably is the most useful and the most troublesome one, and it's literally put forward by a lot of the folks, is that God created the world to make it look old, like it's only 10,000, 6,000 years old, but he created with fossils in the earth, and he created it in the entire universe, so it looks like it's billions of years old. But we know better because we've read the book, and we know it's only 10,000. But God created it for some strange reason to only look 10,000 years old, which means that scientists are deceiving you or God's deceiving you, but someone's pulling the wool over our eyes with this whole sort of old earth looking thing.
Do I detect cynicism in your voice, Richard?
Oh, yeah, I try to keep it out, but I was not yet halfway through my teenage years when I determined this has got to be the biggest load of rubbish I've ever come across. I know. And I had all the magazines. I've been excommunicated twice, so there you go.
In fact, he is an ex excommunicator.
I think he's a pretty decent communicator.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I was going to tell a funny story, but I won't, because it did sort of create a rocky sort of job interview one time, my church history, until I did say, oh yeah, they asked me, oh, did you work for this church organization? And I said, yeah, but they kicked me out. I got excommunicated, and they put the piece of paper down and went, oh, you'll fit right in here then. So,
I do love your opening monologue. I do love the way you're packaging this up, Rich. It's really encouraging to, you know, a lesser Christian would go in fighting and defend everything from the Bible is correct. We need to stand on that. Forget about the 10,000 years, not important. But I love the way you're presenting it. Please, you give us more.
Well, yeah. So thinking about that, see, my problem was, from a very, very young age, I loved the sciences. I loved mystery side of stuff. So I always liked the paranormal, mystery, science fiction. I loved all of that, but I loved science. I loved it so much. And so I would read everything that, you know, my little brain at that time could get a hold of. And it's, you know, it's in order to reject, I use the term settled science maybe more loosely than I should. There's, you know, science is never settled. It's always advancing toward a better understanding of the world. But there are some things that we're just pretty certain. Unless we've misunderstood absolutely everything about reality, we know the world is very, very old. We know the universe is ancient. We know life has been around for a very long time. These are as close to settled science as you can get. And, you know, it's not hard to comprehend because, as I said, as a young teenager, this was perfectly obvious. And this is not indoctrination, because I had every reason not to believe that, because I was deep in a church. In fact, even before I left my teenage years, I was working for a church that believed that. So, you know, my social standing, my income, my studies, everything depended on me not believing that, and yet I still did, because it was obvious. It's once you understand the arguments around it and the dating methods and the way we look at the world, and how it's not just a couple of scientists, it's biology, it's physics, it's archaeology, it's all of the sciences in their own way point toward a very similar direction. Cosmology, you know, astronomy. Name any study, and you're gonna see it all pointing in the same direction. So, for many people who are Christians, this is actually quite a scary challenge to their faith. When your pastors and leaders and parents and, you know, youth leaders and Sunday school teachers are all teaching you there's one thing, and to believe that thing means you're comfortably belonging in the community that you've grown up with. To challenge that thinking is a very scary thing. So I can fully understand why some people just don't go there. But I went there, and I don't know, it's worked out pretty good for me. And not in the terms of being able to be deep in that original community I grew up in. I had to leave that. And it was a very traumatic experience, to tell you the truth. But it's better. It's better living a life where you're happy to be able to embrace truth no matter where it leads you. And so, you know, that's where I find myself now. I won't get into a whole bunch of the other stuff, but I find that sort of very rigid, literalistic interpretation of the Bible just doesn't hit the mark with what we know about science. So there must be some other ways to look at it.
So aside from that, from the biblical perspective, as a let's put that aside for a second, as a human being, how difficult is it for you to wrestle with making it make sense in your mind, knowing full well that you wouldn't defend the argument, surely, would you, that the earth looks like something created by a loving, beautiful God? As Neil deGrasse Tyson said, it's horrific. I mean, it is a planet literally trying to devour us as we live our lives.
Yeah.
How does that sit with you?
Yeah, look, I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think he's super entertaining, and especially in that clip, I think he channels the stand-up comedian and science communicator all in one shot, and I love it.
Yeah.
But he, for me, he's definitely feels like he's speaking towards a very specific view of the Earth, which is it is perfectly, uniquely suited to human flourishing. That's one way that a lot of Christians talk about it, that the earth is perfectly, uniquely created just for people to flourish on. I think they mentioned like a Gaia hypothesis, which is the similar sort of thing, that we are part of this perfectly united kind of planetary organism, for want of a better word. But that's sort of, because we're one, it's perfectly designed for us. And I think that's, as you said, Ro, it's very problematic, because, for goodness sake, you just need to leave Perth, because Perth is heaven on earth. I'm just saying, Western Australia, Western Australia. Yeah. The miners got up here. So, no, Western Australia is one of the most magnificent places on earth. And so you could sort of fool yourself into thinking that, like, you go down to the beach, as long as you don't encounter a great white, you're all right. But you sort of think that, though, you just have to go outside of some of the zones that you realize actually a lot of the earth is uninhabitable. And we're not just talking about the dry land, sea, ocean depths. All of these things aren't perfectly suited to human life. Not now, and certainly not when you take a long view of hundreds to thousands to millions of years. That's when you really notice the inhospitable so-called nature of the earth.
I think that the argument fits in beautifully, doesn't it? And the argument is that we were created and the earth was created for us. Or the other argument is we evolved and we've had to change and become who we are in order to try and fit in with the crazy planet in which we live, which is both, as you mentioned, stunningly beautiful, but incredibly scary and horrific in certain places. And Tyson said, places on earth you can be dropped butt naked and be dead in 10 minutes. I mean, it's phenomenal. So I really want to dig deeper down on this whole idea, how we kind of justify God into all of this. But I just want to check out some comments before we move on. Fenton, hello, boys. G'day, Fenton. Great to have your company as always, mate. Looking forward to some interesting and intriguing comments. Greg, inhospitable equals natural selection. Agree or disagree?
Well, yes. It's a guiding hand.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's the rub right there.
Yes. Well, we can thank natural selection, of course, being explained perfectly to us. Thanks to whose names just jumped out of my head momentarily. Don't you hate that?
Are you talking about Darwin?
Oh, yeah, Charles Darwin. Yeah. That'll do it. Fenton, the anthropic principle.
Yep.
Please
basically
explain.
that. Yeah. We view things as if mankind or humanity is the central point of everything, and maybe it's not.
Yeah. Well, Greg also says the earth is paradise and nature is perfection. Well, that's one view, but what we're saying is the complete polar opposite, that earth is also not paradise and some nature is not perfection. and I think that's clear. If you look around the world, you have to be very careful about where you live, where you go, what you do. Otherwise, you can just be swallowed up, literally. And Fenton, what about drop bears? I wonder how many people around the world actually think that drop bears are a real thing. And my scary feeling is that a lot of them do. Oh, Jason looks shocked. For those people, should I
cannot believe that you revealed the secret.
I haven't revealed anything. I'm just amazed at the amount of people that believe it, which is good because they're true. Why wouldn't they believe it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Yes, Virginia, there are drop bears.
Dear. There are no lies. There is no lie in nature, says Greg. Well, you might have to clarify that. It's a little ambiguous. Yeah, there is no lie in nature. What do you mean? To explain exactly what you mean by that, Greg. And keep the comments coming, everyone. Live on
He's
YouTube.
like a new age Hegel. It's incredible.
New age Hegel. I love it.
This is what Albany does to you. So, what's going to be an interesting question for you, Jace, after Rich and I have talked about it, because I have the connection that Rich had and then don't, so that puts us in a similar box, if you like. For you, as a non-church going Christian person who understands the good of Christianity, but not necessarily buying into the whole deal. What is your observation of the earth and what it represents to you, as far as, do you look at it and go, well, obviously it's a creation of God. I mean, look at it. It's beautiful.
It's a really interesting position. And funnily enough, when Rich started revealing his position on all of this, I thought tonight's not going to be a very exciting episode if we're all in complete agreement. That's kind of the direction I felt that he was heading in. But look, my perspective, and I struggle with this a little bit because I normally completely agree with everything that deGrasse Tyson says. But on this occasion, I actually disagree with him, because whilst there are things about the earth and the universe that obviously are detrimental to the human condition, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't conducive to what we are and how we exist. And if you look at the position of the earth within our own solar system, we're in what they call the Goldilocks zone. It's not too cold, it's not too hot, it's just right. So for the type of life that we are, it's exactly the right temperature. That in itself, you could then start to say we're talking about the anthropic principle. And, you can look at it from a different perspective and say, the reason why the conditions on Earth are perfect for who we are is kind of inextricably linked to the fact that we are. The fact that we are here means that the conditions must have been absolutely perfect. So this is where it almost becomes a circular argument. We wouldn't exist if the conditions weren't conducive to us existing. So the fact that we are here, I think, is a really compelling argument to say that there's something about the conditions of this place that allow us and similar types of animals and creatures to exist. There's a couple of really interesting coincidences that sometimes make me wonder whether everything is just a coincidence. For example, when there's a solar eclipse and we look up at the sun and the moon passes directly in front of the sun, what a coincidence that the distance of the moon from us and the distance from the sun from us, the relative sizes of those two celestial bodies exactly match. So when the moon passes over the sun, from our perspective, the moon is an exact occlusion of the sun. That sometimes to me seems like too much of a coincidence. But stop me there, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist and I don't believe in coincidences and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it does seem a bit of a coincidence. Now,
I agree.
Pete,
it's very hard to come up with an argument for that.
Yeah. Just to finish up. I know that deGrasse Tyson is saying, you could be dropped off anywhere and, 90% of the places on Earth and you would die. Whilst that might be true, we, from my perspective, are hairless apes that have evolved over time from being something that was adapted to that environment to something that through evolutionary processes, time immemorial, have evolved into something that is now an apex predator based on our intelligence, not necessarily our strength or our claws or our teeth, but our intelligence. It's the main weapon that we have. We have one other weapon, which I was unaware of until I watched a documentary recently. And that's when we have a look at some of the early hunting methods in, for example, Africa. The fact that we are an upright, hairless ape meant that we had enormous stamina in terms of tracking down animals. So when we wanted to hunt, we were able to go for longer, perhaps at a slower pace, but we were able to evaporate the heat off our bodies, and we had the stamina to keep going. We were upright, so we had greater vision. We had the binocular vision, so we had the ability to judge the hunting techniques that we needed to take. All of these are obviously evolutionary as well. To argue that God actually put us all here is making what I think is a fairly outrageous claim with no direct basis to actually make that claim in the first place, other than faith. Whereas I can look at our evolutionary ancestors and go, it's clear to me that we have evolved from that point. And sometimes I hear Christians say, well, hang on, how come there's still chimpanzees? How come there's still great apes? How come there's still bonobos? Why didn't they evolve? And it kind of misses the whole argument. It misses, you have different evolutionary lines. So I guess what I'm trying to say, to bring it all back into a nice tidy little package, is we exist on a planet that supports who and what we are. I want to add one more thing into the mix that we maybe can talk about later on, perhaps don't have to talk about now. The Earth is very, very old, right? If we're talking 13, 14 billion years old, everything that we know about humanity, we basically know about in the last 6,000 to 10,000 years. All of the ideas that we've got about civilization, about farming, all of that kind of thing, we're only perceiving in, if you looked at the history of the Earth as a 24-hour clock, we're looking at that last half second, even less than that. So there is a huge history of the human race that goes back well before any recorded or remembered history. We are beginning to find things buried in the Earth that are starting to give us clues that there may have been advanced human civilizations prior to anything that we know about. And why wouldn't there be? If we have the intelligence, if our predecessors, who were as evolved as we are, what if they developed technologies and they were just as smart as us, and then they went through that great filter and wiped themselves out? Or the Earth was hit by a meteor and it wiped them out, and enough survived to continue the species. And who knows how many times over a billion years that may have happened.
Mm.
That is one of the most intriguing things that I find about all of these arguments. And just like you, Richard, I'm a big fan of science. And I love the fact that when science appears to have gotten something wrong, it doesn't mean it was wrong. It just means that we've learned more.
That's it.
Yeah, no, great argument. And I think that's science, and probably science alone is what I could not separate the reality of science and the faith of religion. I could not marry the two together. It became too forced and did not make any sense. It was, and I'm an evidence-based person, so for me to believe what I believe without any evidence was folly. And eventually, I chose that I had to believe in something that was at least provable. The interesting thing, and that's a great segment for this, I don't necessarily agree with everything you said as far as we've evolved into a planet which has kind of allowed us to live and to expand, and we might come back to that. But the idea of design is a very strong one for Christians when it comes to the incredible things like if the moon or the sun was like tiny little increments of distance further away or closer, we wouldn't exist. Now that sounds unbelievable, and it is. But if you consider the trillions and trillions and trillions of spheres throughout the universe, which they've actually gone to the edge of the universe as far as we can see. It doesn't stop there. It could be infinite. If you consider that, it's quite feasible that that just is a unique, freaky thing that just happened to happen, and it's not by design. You can't, for me, you can't say, so the Earth passing in front of the sun is an incredible thing, and it just happens to be the right distance and the right thing for everything to happen. Yet look at the Earth with its magna crust and its instability, and it's like we go back to the same thing all the time, saying that it's not. And we go, oh, look at the beautiful beaches. And Rich said, great, beautiful beaches and fantastic. Yeah, go in there and see what happens to you when a shark comes around. You want to go into their place, go, but take the risk that you're going to get chewed up, spat out very quickly. So even our beautiful oceans have incredible terror, and they're a dangerous place to go into. So
But they're still nice to play in.
Argument. Absolutely. Put bloody bars around so the sharks can't get you, for goodness sake.
It's all a matter of perspective, Pete. You can talk about how dangerous things are. We have ways of mitigating it, but at the same time, if you're scared of everything, you wouldn't step outside of the house. And so we do expose ourselves to all of these risks every day. But I would argue that the beauty of the earth is worth those minor, manageable risks. I have one question for you guys, though, as people who have either been Christians or are Christians. If God created the earth in basically the 6 or 7 days, I want to know from an OHS point of view, did he just do 8-hour days, or was this like 24-hour, shift or something? I don't know. I need to know. I need answers, guys.
That's actually a very interesting question. I've thought about that myself. We just automatically pack it into what it is for us in a day of 24 hours. And
that's right. Did he take smoko breaks? I don't know.
Let's digress for a sec, Richard, and answer that for us if you can. When the Bible talks about 7 days, have you any idea about what it is they're actually talking about?
So there is the ultra literalist, which I was brought up as, which is literally 7 24-hour days. Bang, 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 bang. This is how it is.
No such thing.
8 hours a day.
Well, he must have. No, there wasn't a union, so probably
no lunch breaks.
No lunch breaks. So that's one view. So if you ask the absolute hardcore Bible believers, I'm a Bible believer, but you know what I mean. They would say that. Then there is a more nuanced version, which is, well, the word day can, the word day in the Hebrew Bible can be used in a way in other places that actually refer to like a time period, like the day of the Triffids. If you've seen that one, it's not like it was a 24-hour day. It's like a period, an epoch.
Hey.
Some other Christians say, well, you can, if you imagine there's like 7 epochs, eons, we can sort of then, there's enough time to like fit in evolution, except the order doesn't match up, and then you're back to square one. So there's all these kinds of ways, or maybe they call a gap theory. So there was all of this creation, and then something tumultuous happened and destroyed everything. And then he sort of reformed things. And so it's the prior history that we see in evolutionary history. And the Bible sort of like resets things about 10,000 years ago. But these all depend on the idea that somehow an ancient myth story to explain something more true is somehow true in its details rather than true in what it's trying to say about the nature of God and the nature of people. And as you can see, I'm probably giving away my point of view is I don't think it's talking about the mechanics or the physics or the biology or the history of the actual forming of the earth in any way. I think it's talking far more about how ancient people understood the nature of God to be and the nature of people. And maybe also the idea and this is the big question, Fenton sort of hits it there, it seems like there's this idea that the earth is this perfect environment for us. It's like the place created for us to live on. And if it's that, we look around and it feels like even thousands of years ago, it doesn't look like it. There's so much pain, so much suffering, so much stuff going wrong, so much stuff that doesn't fit. What's gone wrong? And one of the stories is the fall, sin, the devil,
It's our fault.
and atheists even running around ruining it for everybody. And so that's sort of the explanation of why the idea of a perfect earth and what we see doesn't match up. Sin, Satan, and stuff like that is one of the answers people give. It's not the answer I give.
Rich, you've mentioned the 10,000 years a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just a number that you're plucking out, or does that have some significance?
Yeah. Okay. So it's based on, because when you read through those early books of the Bible, there are genealogies that go from Adam to Jesus. Now we know when Jesus was around. And so if you sort of add up the generations, you actually come up to 6,000 years if you really, really are creative and understand big gaps and things. You can stretch it out to 10,000 years.
The reason I ask,
that's where
and
they come up.
You're probably aware of this. There was a massive, massive, well, I won't call it an impact, a massive thing that happened on Earth around about 12,000 years before the present time, called the Younger Dryas. And that's a point at which the temperature changed enormously, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, and there was massive flooding that occurred. And there is science and a historical record of that. And when I read about stuff like that, that makes me wonder if sometimes some of the stories that we hear about, and almost every religion has some vague memory of a massive flood, I can't help but think there might be some truth in this whole idea of the Great Flood, but from a historical perspective, not from a spiritual or a biblical perspective. And that then brings me back to the idea that the Bible is actually a whole bunch of stories and stuff that's just been compiled. I like to think of it as a compendium as opposed to a novel.
That's exactly what it is, Jace. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is it possible that the Great Flood story, for example, is actually a reasonably inaccurate but telling of the story of the floods that did happen in reality before recorded history?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of proof. One of the arguments, of course, Jace, is that back in the day when the flood was allegedly happened, is that the people's understanding of how big the Earth was outside of their small area was completely. There would have been
like
flood.
People in the United States. Sorry, Fenton.
Yeah. Yes, definitely there were floods, as there has been throughout our time on the Earth, but I don't think they really realised just how perhaps isolated it might have been, and there was no way of telling.
Yeah. The flood of the world. If your whole world is flooded, what's the difference between conceptualizing it? There's that sort of the cosmic world. So exactly right.
And was that story told just purely so they could make up a story about the ark?
You know, one of the keys for me for reading some of those old stories is some of it's situated in a culture. So the creation stories read very similar to other cultures of that time creation stories for a good reason, because they're drawing from their cultural understanding, but they're actually telling a very different kind of story about God. Other creation stories says gods are like this, and the Hebrew Bible is saying, well, actually, we're going to tell the story in the same kind of way, but the point of it is God actually comes out as a very different kind of idea. So that's what they're doing all the way through. So there's a lot of stories like that, but there's a whole lot of stories that are outright propaganda to prop up empire and monarchy and enslavement. And it's very much like, okay, we're going to keep this propaganda in so we know how dastardly we can be. These look, We even get God onto our side. We say things like, God told me to go and slaughter the people, babies and all. And we keep that there so we remind ourselves how terrible we can be, even recruiting the God of love onto our side to slaughter our enemies for us. And so there's a lot of that going on in the Old Testament.
Well,
You're
that exists
absolutely right.
today, Richard. That's what Christian nationalists are right now. They're using the
they
name
haven't
of
got it,
Christ
yeah.
for power, for social power.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
Always
he
have
would
done.
be he would be rotating on his cross if he heard about this.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing I would like to talk about that you kind of touched on, which might be a great other podcast, guys, talking about history and you look at the Aboriginal people in Australia and 50,000 years. We don't talk about that very often. We're talking about biblical times and we're talking about the life of Christ and what stories. And I have a bit of an insight into some of the great stories. What stories would have been told over that 50,000 year period where there would have been asteroids hitting the Earth? There would have been all sorts of incredible things, but it just sort of suddenly we go, oh, that's right. There they were. That's amazing. They've been around for that amount of time. Yeah, okay. Let's not pay too much attention to that. Let's just move on. What that would be insane to look back and I actually would love to get an elder on this podcast and talk about the stories that have been handed down. I've had a fair amount of contact with Aboriginal people throughout my life in Broome and Dampier and Doodlakine and Pinjarra and stuff like that, and I'm fascinated by the race. We have Aboriginal people in our family. It's incredible. I'd like to look deeper at it, but we'll put that on the back burner for maybe another time and have a look at some of the comments. Greg put in after, he said there is no lie in nature, almost like it was designed. Look, I mean, yeah, I find that really a really hard pill to swallow, that if it was all by design, the beauty of nature and the stunning planet that we live on, why would a designer, if you had the opportunity to make it exactly how you wanted to make it, if that's God is all powerful, that was sold that and all loving and wants the best for people, why would God consciously make a planet that if you're a designer, you'd be sacked? Because if it was a building, it would have fallen down. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Why would you do piranhas?
By
Flies.
design? Yeah. The little flies that got crawl in the back of children's eyes and eat them out. Yeah. I mean, come on.
No.
That Fenton says the big mystery for me, sorry, where is it? Given God's goals and desires expressed in the Bible, we wouldn't see a world like this. I assess it based on the success of an infallible being. So absolutely. Couldn't agree more, mate. Well done. That 400,000-year-old man made wood bench. They just found it's amazing. I don't know about this story. Does anyone know about that 400,000-year-old wooden bench?
Don't know about that specific one, but there was also a similar story about a coal mine in the UK. They were digging and they were a long way down, and they discovered a metal cog, like,
oh wow,
within the coal seam. So it had to have been there for millions of years.
Wow.
Boom, you know.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
and again, the best
whether it's rock or concrete or steel, no matter what it is, what do you think the maximum amount of time is that anything man-made would last if we just left it there? Because look at the pyramids, and there's an argument that they're possibly up to 12,000 years old, and they're crumbling away into nothing. And that's not just because people have pilfered stuff from the pyramids.
Yeah.
Stone itself is wearing away, and you know, it doesn't rain there at the moment, but it did at one point in time. How long do human creations last? Mountains wear away. You know, we look at our history, it's a very, very short amount of time.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Another comment from Fenton. The best explanation for global flood stories is that humans usually congregate around bodies of water. Absolutely. I'm pretty sure a lot of the Noah flood came from the Epic of Gilgamesh. look, Ken Ham is a classic person who loves to put up the argument about flooding and tries to make it all fit together. Is he the nut rich that's got the museum somewhere in the back blocks of America that's got all the
The
fossils
one that built the Noah's Ark.
bits of the ark and all the rest of it?
Yeah.
I mean,
The Noah's Ark Fun
wow.
Park.
Yeah, that's
The
what
only-
it is.
the only
It's
good
a,
thing- Yes.
it's a
The only
It's a
good thing
Christian
about Ken Ham is
Disneyland.
that he's an Australian.
I know.
He's a sad case. Look, I've seen him interviewed and had debates with a lot of intellectual people who, unfortunately for him, know a hell of a lot more about what's going on. And
Right?
he's just,
I don't know if you just said it, mate. Did you say he was an Australian?
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. It just came to me. Yeah, he's Australian. Wow.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
probably the straightest, most conservative, ignorant Christian I could ever imagine. He's just, he's almost as bad as our good mate, the banana dude. What's his name?
The
I know who
banana.
you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. The guy is the argument about the banana. That's what he said. His argument.
Oh, right, because of the shape that fits in our hand and blah blah blah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I actually invited him to be a part of this podcast, and needless to say, I've heard nothing back from him.
You can't be that dumb then.
I can't think of his
Andrew
name.
just told us. Oh,
But
thanks.
I've seen him do quite a few debates with people, and it's just an embarrassment. But his name will come to me as things. Ray Comfort, thank you, Fenton. If you want to laugh, if at the expense of another human being, and you feel that cruel, go and check out Ray Comfort. Matt Dillahunty loves tearing him apart. He ends up just getting rid of him, hanging up in the end because he can't. He can't. He's one of these. He's one of these people, Ray Comfort, who has a perfect, in his mind, circular argument. Which, if you say this, it's because of that, and if you don't say that, it's because of this, and you can't ever win in his mind. And you just, in the end, you just want to just scream because he's just so frustrating. But Fenton also said the Ark encounter. It's bizarre. They have dinosaurs in there.
Yeah, that's Ken Ham's amusement park.
I mean, they built this thing. It's like over 500 foot long, whatever
Yeah.
that translates to in meters. I mean, it's a massive monument. But I understand that, like, actual shipbuilders have looked at it and gone, that will float, but it will also roll over because its draft is not.
Mm.
And there was, I mean, and of course, we're only going by the images that we grew up with as kids. This great big wooden thing without rudders, without sails, without anything, just floating on the ocean. And I would imagine it would be incredibly rough. That the fact that they're saying the whole ocean is covered in water, and it's scooting past mountain tops and all the rest of it, and it's like, wow, it's a fun story for kids. It's nice to think that there was this big boat and they were all rescued, and there was two of every animal in there. They didn't talk about the food and all of the mess that they would make, and how some of them would naturally eat the others because they're and then they send out the pigeon to find a little leaf and to prove that there was. I mean, it's a great story. I grew up reading it. It's lovely. It's not based.
Did
on
he also
reality.
did he also on the Noah's Ark take all the insects aboard as well, like scorpions and all the spiders and everything?
We're told.
Wow.
Everything.
Mosquitoes? I mean, did you know of
Well-
all of the creatures that exist, the
Yes.
most dangerous, most lethal creature in the world is the mosquito?
Yeah, and
It's
more
killed
people
more
died of malaria. Yeah.
More people have died from mosquitoes spreading malaria than any other animal has put together ever. In fact,
Yeah.
more people have died of malaria in human history than are alive today. How's that for
Wow.
a statistic?
Wow,
Yeah.
that is huge. Also worth mentioning that we transform our understanding of animals nowadays into the animals that were around when there was an ark. There might have only been 30 animals on the planet for all we know. I mean, a few oxen and a couple of, who knows how many animals and insects and stuff were there. It may have been feasible, guys. It may have actually happened.
Oh,
And these are the
have you?
arguments we're given. Yeah.
Have you ever been
Sorry?
on a cruise
Those are
liner?
the arguments we were given of why it
Yes.
could be true. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys have been on a cruise liner?
Been on a cruise once, never do it again. Yep.
Yep. No, same. But were you lucky enough to see how the cruise liner replenishes supplies? Because I once watched a documentary on that as well. The amount of goods that get brought onto the ship through forklifts and everything else,
Yep.
if you had that many animals on board the ark, you're going to need an enormous amount of food and water. What are you going to do?
Where was the water kept?
Yeah. Rain.
But it stopped raining. See, that's the trick.
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh, but it was only
once-
40 days. It was only
That's
40
right.
days, wasn't it?
Yes.
You can fast for 40 days.
Which is also the time that people spent in the desert, following some guy who clearly didn't know where he was going. And after 40 days, you would have thought, you know what, mate? You don't know what you're doing. We're lost.
The bloody GPS is not working.
That's right. So one of the things. Sorry, what were you going to say, Rich?
No, I was going to say, I was going to just sometime talk about what Fenton said about the given God's goals and desires expressed in the Bible. I think that's, for me, that's the piece where everything turns on and how I understand things. But we can talk about that in a moment.
Couldn't, I mean, Rich, just a question. Couldn't your belief in God, your belief in Christ, couldn't all of that still hold true, even if the Bible was just fiction? I mean, is that a step too far? I mean, I know what you believe of the Bible, but just for one moment, that mental exercise of, I believe in God, I believe in Christ, the Bible is fiction. Is there cognitive dissonance there, or could that work?
Yeah, not so much for me, in the sense that when you're talking about genres of writings and things like that, we assume history of the ancient world is the same as what our history textbooks, and they are vastly different things, almost to the point where if you're going to choose a category, that it's more likely going to fall into things like propaganda, like fiction, but maybe historical fiction, in the sense that you read Indiana Jones. There really were Nazis. There really was this. There really was that. But the characters are amalgamated and they're put together.
And of course, history is always written by the victors.
Exactly. So there's a whole lot of that going on, and so for me, it brings a very good way of talking about how can I use my brain and yet hang on to the Bible in any way. And one of the ways I do it is recognizing how it functions. It doesn't function as some kind of textbook to give us the facts and figures and we go, oh yeah, that all lines up, because it was never meant to do that. It's never, in a lot of the long history, a lot of people didn't use it that way. It was actually meant to sustain and inform a community of faith in a certain way, a pre-modern society for most part. But for me, when I'm looking at things in the Bible, I can come up with ideas. I can scholars do. They say this is a proposal of how the world is, or what really happens, or how human nature is. And you go, okay, that's one piece of data. We've got a whole lot more data. Part of it is scientific experiments on matter, on biology, on this, human psychology. For me, quite an important part is philosophy, the ability to think through the implications, even towards a bent towards metaphysics, but that's just because that's how I am. But all of the ideas from the Bible have to line up with all of the data we have. If it doesn't, it's wrong. Just because there's an old saying, the Bible says it, I believe it, and it's true, or it's so. Well, not really, because the Bible doesn't say anything. The Bible is a writing that has to be interpreted. Every
Are
time
you-
somebody reads a text, you interpret it.
Do you know of the theologian Barbara Teering?
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, so Barbara Teering, I thought she was reasonably well known in the community, Christian community, but maybe not. She's an Australian as well. Have a look at some of her books, because she's written one which I read and really enjoyed, called Jesus the Man, and she obviously looks at the Bible and the apocalyptic sort of the stuff that's in there and stuff. And she has applied this thing that's called the Pesher technique for looking at it and reinterpreting what some of the Hebrew translations were. And she's made a couple of really good points about the Bible itself, and how it is a really, really great textbook that is perhaps analogous to what we do today with television and newspapers, in that if you have a bunch of illiterate people living in the desert, what better way to help them live a more civilized and social and cultural existence than to create a bunch of writings that give people rules about how they should treat each other and how they should practice hygiene and the sorts of things that they should be doing to live in that kind of environment. And so she's kind of sort of tried to demonstrate that the Bible plays many functions. Apart from the belief structures, it's also a textbook to teach people the right way to live in times before television and radio and news and schools and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of that sort of stuff going on, I reckon.
Yeah, well, the one thing that she said that blew my mind, and I thought that is the most blasphemous thing that any theologian or academic could say. She is arguing that the translation that we've been using to call Mary a virgin is in fact a mistranslation of the original Hebrew term, where what we've called virgin actually means unmarried woman. And if you think about that from that perspective, suddenly the whole story takes on a very different angle, makes a lot more sense, makes you more comfortable about how Joseph might feel about the whole situation, but also then completely devalues the mysticism of that story as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great things for me as an atheist, a lot of great things to be said about the Bible. But I can understand from your perspective why that is just absolute heresy.
Not really. I'm very, very open to critical scholarship of the scriptures, because if you value the writings, understanding the best you can understand about them can only be good. And if it means you have to adjust some of the ways you think about things, or you've previously understood it, just like we do in science, moving towards more truth has to be the goal. Otherwise, we're just playing power games like that we were talking about before. But for me, the whole thing turns on. The problem is not whether you believe in God or not. I think the whole problem is, do you believe that God's purpose in, I'm going to use quote unquote creation, is creating a home for humans to live on and die on and hopefully believe in him, so then we can pack that all up and go to a new place called heaven. That's one sort of vision of Christian stuff. I think there's so many things broken about that picture. Philosophically, I don't know how a good God can actually exist in such a story arc. It doesn't look good anywhere along the line, that timeline. Nature doesn't support it, like we've been talking about. Or, this is not some radical rethinking of things. This is how a lot of early Christians in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century spoke about it, which was, they noticed in the early writings there in Genesis, it says when God was creating, said God spoke this and spoke that and spoke this into being. And then he goes, oh, time for humanity, the human, actually. And what he didn't speak the human into being. In fact, there's this sort of conference among the, we would call it the Trinity, but among the gods. And they said, well, we're going to start a project. So we've created stuff. by speaking and pops into being. But when it comes to humanity, they went, let us make the human in our likeness, in our being. And almost like it was the way that the language is constructed, instead of being a creation state where he's just like, here's a home, plop some people on it, good luck to you. It's like, we've got a project now. We are going to create humanity. And what you see is the history of the universe is the creation of the human. And they talked about when Jesus came along, they went, oh, here's the first real human. In fact, a lot of early Christian theologians would say things like, we aren't yet created. I think it was St. Irenaeus, if I'm getting it right. He's on his way to be martyred, and he writes a letter to his church. He says, don't prevent this thing happening. I must go and die. He says, I'm in birth pangs. I'm going to be created. He was basically saying, I'm not yet born. I'm not yet created. I'm not yet human, is what he was writing back to his church. He saw the project of what he sees around the world is a process of being created. And more modern thinkers, especially some of the Eastern Orthodox theologians that have come out of Russia, crazy. I mean, the Russians must have something in the land there that causes them to think in a completely different way. But a lot of them are coming up and saying, well, Christian theology, if we're really going to square it with everything, has to mean that the end goal, the purpose of creation is not happy little Adams and Eves running around naked in a garden. The purpose of creation is the entire cosmos being deified, being made like God. The end point isn't even human beings, but the entire interconnected network of reality being summed up in God. And that's what they talked about. And so if you think about that, and that's a valid Christian theology, creation is the calling out of nothing and the process of becoming like God. And we know that, for instance, that can't happen instantaneously. Like, imagine like you created what it would mean to be created completely with all your character and morality and points of view instantaneously. You go, that can't be authentically real. That's literally just a simulation. It's a robot. It's AI. It's not actually real. The reason why it's real is because we've struggled. We've had to make decisions. We've hit heartache and chosen the bad path and suffered, and then later on chosen the good path and been transformed by that choice, suffered through it, and now we're a new person and we see the world differently. It's the process that forms authentic relationships, authentic being, authentic free will. And I do believe physics can support the idea of a truly free will. The only way that any of this is real is if there has to be a process. And the only way, in my opinion, that Christianity and the reality of what we see in the world is some kind of process like that, calling out of nothing towards something greater, not some fairy tale about creating a home, plopping some humans, run around naked. Oh, you stuffed it up. Well, we'll spank you. That's why everything's gone wrong, and we'll create a new heaven. That can't work. There has to be something rich.
Just based on what Richard just said and something that you mentioned earlier on. So you've been religious and devout, but you've also had a wealth of experience with Aboriginal people. Now, from your Christian perspective, the earth is 6,000 years old. From your knowledge of the Aboriginal people who have been around for 50,000 years, they didn't know anything about Christianity. How do you reconcile those two issues as a devout person?
Well, one of the things that struck me, and great question, is that it seems, and Aboriginal people are the same, every culture in the world has created their gods. Now, why? I find that staggering. If you go back and have a look at all of the stories, the Dreamtime stories from Aboriginal people, why would you, in a in a country in the beginning where they came across, obviously, from another part of the world and lived in Australia for 50,000 years. Why would you? Is it the same essence of all human beings that they need some kind of explanation as to what's going on? What is that light in the sky? What does that mean? You know, when it's raining, when it's thunder, all of the stuff that all of the cultures all around the world have all come up with. So for me to reconcile that with what I learned, I mean, to answer your question, I think I can't, I don't get it.
Well, you know, I've been doing some further education, PhD in Aboriginal culture. And then I've also been, in my spare time, it's actually avoiding writing the thesis. I've been listening to a lot of brain scientists talk about perception. And one of the things, they weren't talking about any of the stuff. They're literally just talking about perception. And somebody said something to one of the brain scientists, Ian McGilchrist. Ian McGilchrist, if you haven't read any of his stuff, really interesting. But he was basically saying, how do you know what's real? We only know what's real by a first-person perception. You don't even have direct access to empirical evidence. It gets processed. It's like, and we know that depending on certain structures in the brain, certain experiences, certain attention circuits, two people looking at the same thing can see different realities. It's just the way that it is. And we know it. We can't like we look at a scene, our eyes can only see a certain thing in focus. And yet our brains construct a reality that's more full based on experience and what we expect to be there. And he said somebody asked him about fairy tales, and he says, don't be too quick to say what other cultures can and cannot see. We may be the ones who just don't have the capacity to see, and I'm going to say what the Aboriginal people have always been able to see. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. Their experience, the meaning they wrap around it might be a very culturally rich expression, but it's not devoid of reality. It could be something very real and very significant.
Rich, you've hit it now on the head there.
Just go on quickly because I need to jump in and do
just very quickly. I almost had a punch up in a pub once over what you've just described, because this discussion around Aboriginals and the value of their culture versus the value of our culture, and this idea that Western culture is so much better because we have cars and houses and airplanes and money. That is a construct that we hold true to us, but it is meaningless to them as a different culture. Everything that they've got, and keep in mind that their culture goes back so much further than ours, their dream time, their truth telling, and all of those things, if they've lasted that much time compared to our minimal 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, call it 10,000 years, that's still 5 times shorter than what their culture has done. Who's to say who's more advanced? You know, are they happier than us? What is the measure of what we should be looking for? God aside, Christianity aside, how do we measure this? How do we know what's right, what's good?
Well, I mean, until you replace white arrogance with humility and wanting to understand. I mean, if you go back and have a look at Aboriginal culture, they created music first. No one had done musical instruments, the didgeridoo and sticks made of wood that are so incredibly hard that they make that amazing sound. Health, medicine from natural plants. You can think of the list is incredibly long of things that they created well before any of us. And we have the opportunity to come along and go, you know what? We're a couple of 100 years old. We get that in Australia. Yeah, not a problem at all. You're 50,000 years. Let's learn how to do this.
Yeah,
and we don't, and we should, and it's a big subject. I'd love to talk about it more, but there's a lot of stuff coming in. And just to mention too, it's in Perth, in Western Australia. It's just after around about 9:20. We wrap up in probably 15, 20 minutes, depending. So if you've got something you'd like to share with us tonight, please jump on. We really appreciate your opinions and have a listen to what it is that you think about what we're talking about tonight, which is an amazing subject, one of those ones that just flits off in different directions all the time, but it's encapsulated in the whole idea of what we're talking about. I'm just having a look, seeing if we read that one. Yeah, that was the free will. Oh, no, actually, another good argument against it. This is from Fenton Mully against the perfect world, is if the point of earthly struggles is
Muted again. Pete, you're muted.
I don't know why it does this, seriously. What did you hear?
You just started reading Fenton's comment.
Okay. Another good argument against the perfect world is if the point of earthly struggles is that God wanted us to have free will, but why couldn't he give us all free will in heaven? Christopher Hitchens, I love, he said, there is free will. You've got it. God insists on you having it. Which I think is complete. It's hilarity, because if you can't give someone, I insist you have free will. But I think Christopher manipulates language a little bit around to make that point. But it's funny, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
What would be the point, though, if there wasn't free will? What would be the point? If everything's preordained, then
Correct.
and God can already see what's going to happen, then what's the point of going through this exercise in the first place? It's like writing a novel. You know, it's like you already know the conclusion. Yeah. Why read the book if you already know the conclusion?
Yeah, I get you. Everything in earth works exactly as it should in perfect balance. That's from Greg. I think clearly we've demonstrated tonight that isn't true. I don't think there's a perfect balance at all. It's a great balance that gives us life, but it's not necessarily a perfect life or a great life. We still suffer and die and all of the other things you would expect to happen on a planet such as the one we live on. J.S. Steele 650, a new addition to our comments. The Holy Spirit reveals it to you. God has to open your eyes to heart. Open your eyes to heart so you can understand it. It is veiled by God.
Why? Why is it veiled by God? And why is it up to God?
J.S. Steele 650 follows it up with another comment which may make it clearer. You're right. It is a work in progress. The word is powerful. You take it in, you decrease, and Christ in your increases. That to me, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. Love having you people coming in and talking about things. That to me just sounds like a lot of Christian talk, unfortunately, and doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know about the other two guys, but we'll come back to them in a minute and ask. And Fenton saying, imagine knowing nothing about making babies, but the fun part, and then she gets bid and a baby pops out. You will have to make up some magical story. It has to be very confusing. I don't know what's going on in California there where you are, Fenton, but this is some pretty crazy shit, mate.
Joseph. Can you imagine? Imagine being Joseph.
No.
You're pregnant. What? You're pregnant, but we haven't even... What? Magical. Through your ear.
Give me the joy. Let me fulfill. But what's amazing is that in many Catholic churches, of course, Joseph now has been elevated to the importance of almost to Mary. Not quite, but he's the man that people are praying to as well, and hoping that he can acknowledge them and give them their prayers, their wishes, which is crazy. I think that was the last one, wasn't it? Yeah, but please feel free to jump in. We've got plenty of time to have a...
Can I just talk about one thing that I heard Ricky Gervais say the other day, and you guys might be aware of this particular one. I know how much you like Ricky Gervais, and I've got a lot of respect for the guy as well, even though some of the stuff he says is completely outrageous and offensive. I think a lot of it, when taken in context, is actually a great social observation. I don't think he means to necessarily be offensive. I think he's exposing part of the human condition. Anyway, yes. I'm not making excuses for him. The thing that he said, which I found particularly powerful, he was being challenged about this whole idea of Christianity and the Bible and all the biblical teachings. And he said, look at it this way. If we burnt everything today, we burnt all the science books, we burnt all of the Bibles and everything else, and we were left with nothing, society, who now has nothing, doesn't know any of these teachings, would eventually recreate all of the science books, because all that stuff is true, testable, experimental. We can get there again. But would the story of Christianity be recreated again? Where does that come from? Is that a memory? Is that a testable thesis? Is that something that would once again be delivered to us through some divine mechanism? Christianity and science is real and genuine, and and would be recreated, would be reinvented, would be redocumented. But Christianity, is it a fiction, and how would it be recreated, if at all?
I think that's one of the first times I haven't heard of Ricky Gervais actually saying that. It's interesting. Rich, go on. You want to say something?
I was just going to say, on one level, it makes sense, but it's a very circular argument that begs the question, because the question that prompts why would you burn all the books is, does God exist? Does he speak to people? And the imagined scenario is built on a world where the conclusion's already there, which God doesn't speak. So you wouldn't even have to burn the books down, because God doesn't speak, so God doesn't speak, so God doesn't speak. It's like it's a begging the question kind of thing. However, the idea of pushing out the dross and actually letting him speak again might be interesting. But look, burn all the books and allow him to speak to the next prophet is as valid a thing to say, because we cannot 100% rule in or rule out such a metaphysical reality using empirical science, because empirical science is bracketed off the supernatural. It says we will not look there, we will not consider it. So any argument made from empirical science against the supernatural just can't work. Certain claims about the supernatural it can speak against, but the reality of such a realm is not accessible to empirical science.
But it's a very convenient argument, Richard. And you know how much I respect you. You know, I'm not.
What I'm saying is, it's the very nature of empirical science. Empirical science says only things that can be seen and measured will be considered, which literally brackets out the claims of a metaphysical reality beyond the physical realm.
Yeah, but so this is
by saying we're not going to look at anything but the physical realm, therefore we can prove that nothing but the physical realm is real. It cannot be proven by empirical science. It's a closed system that cannot
from
speak.
The opposite perspective, now what you're saying is we can't test this because magic.
No, what I'm saying is the very premise of empirical science has ruled out considering anything but the physical realm. So there's
that's not true.
No, 100% it is.
No. There's constant research going into the supernatural and all of those things that we don't know.
Jace, you're right. I misspoke. Supernatural is not the right word. Non-physical reality is probably a better word. So empirical science says we only look at physical reality. So therefore, as by definition, it cannot say anything about non-physical reality. It just can't, by definition. So, like Ricky Gervais, I guess I get what he's saying, but by saying we can use empirical science to prove that there's nothing not physical is a misapplication of the whole project. It literally cannot speak outside.
I don't think he's saying that, and this is an example. I don't think he's saying that God doesn't exist in that particular example. What he's saying is that the fable and the tale of Christianity perhaps is the bit that's been made up. I don't think he's denying the existence of God when he talks about that. What he's saying is this whole Christian story is made up.
Yeah, I get what he's saying. I think he's just been listening to a whole bunch of less than stellar proponents of Christianity, shall we say. And if I'd only heard those people speak, I'd be on team Ricky Gervais as well.
I mean, I love and get excited about, because people like Ricky Gervais, Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, all those people, Sam Harris, 15, 20 years ago, there was no one in defense of the argument against Christianity. It was pretty much, not dead in the water, but then suddenly all these people came along and started saying things which spoke to people like me. And Ricky Gervais went from being a favorite comedian of mine in starting out in The Office to developing into a man who understood he had a different perspective. And I love the way he sees things and says things. It speaks to me. There's none of the bull dust and the bullshit that goes with debates about this. He just cuts to a simple chase. Christopher Hitchens is there, who of course would have inspired Ricky Gervais, Neil deGrasse Tyson, all of these people who are, I know, to Christian people like you, Rich. I understand how their speak, their understanding, what they see, what they say, seems to be so it's not simplified. It's not the right word. It's a way of kind of enveloping the whole understanding of the whole God thing, that they just cut out so much of the crap, and it just seems so digestible, as it were, for want of another word. It seems so easy to embrace it in my shoes, not where you're at. I understand that. I would have rejected everything Ricky Gervais said when I was a full-on Christian. I would have thought it was just bordering on blasphemy and stuff like that. But now I hear it and it's refreshing, because it kind of resonates with me. And it doesn't resonate with anyone. And I would imagine that J.S. Steele 650, it's definitely not resonating with you. If I could just read some of your comments on God looks at your heart. If you truly want to know truth, God unveils it. The word is hidden from the fool. J.S. Steele 650, if I can just give you a little bit of advice. Love having you on our podcast. Please continue. But you've got to understand there's a part of the Bible that says, don't cast pearl before swine. Meaning that pigs have no ability to understand the preciousness of a pearl. I understand that what you think you're saying is right and it's good, but it's falling on deaf ears. Even Rich, who's a full-on Christian, I doubt would look at that and go, that really inspires me, those words. I don't know. I don't want to.
More than that, it not only is it casting pearls before swine, because that stuff might mean a lot to believers, but to me, that comes across as being unhinged. And that actually is detrimental to people wanting us to have more faith in Christianity itself. I look at that and I go, that person's just...
I understand both, but J.S. Steele 650, if you really want to somehow purvey how God has impacted your life in a way that has made you happier or better or kinder, please just use words that say that. I mean, then you go, yes, he speaks through his word and other believers, his body. That makes no sense, because I don't believe. I was a Christian. I don't believe that anymore. Jason certainly doesn't. And Rich, I think, is far too developed as a Christian man to just see that and go, yes. And then the Lord is blessed. Is he that believes before he sees it? That is what Christ told doubting Thomas. Can
I ask you, as someone who used to believe and now doesn't believe, and Rich as someone who believes, and me as an atheist, if I was to say God is love, can we all agree on that? Even if we're not religious? I'm an atheist, but...
Well, it's not about being religious. It's about whether you believe God is actually real. So for me to say, so I believe, that makes no sense.
But other way round as well. Love is God. So the idea of love, the idea of all of us trying to be together, trying to be one group of people, whatever you call it, the universe, Mother Nature, karma, Gaia, God, the sense that there is something that connects all of us, and it might not be divine, it might actually be down to the fact that there are resonant frequencies in the universe. Whatever you want to call it, there is a connection.
Yep.
Some call it God.
Love is love. It's something that we all have the ability to feel, to give, to take, to ensure, to encourage, all of that stuff. And we are all intrinsically linked. What I have a problem with, and obviously so do you, is that we get so caught up on mumbo jumbo words
Yep.
that mean,
Yep.
if you break
Mm.
down, the Lord said, blessed is he that believes before he sees it. I mean, I'm so over Christian people lecturing to me scriptures that mean nothing. You need
Yeah.
to read your audience, J.S. Steele. I'm sure you've got something really important and meaningful to say to us. Talk to us. Don't give us scriptures. Just give us what you feel as a human being. Talk like a person. You're not going to achieve anything. I don't know what you're trying to achieve by doing that. You're not going to convert us. You're not going to make us think that that's absolutely right. I love God all of a sudden. It doesn't work that way.
If the Bible means nothing to an atheist or a non-believer, quoting scripture to them actually has the opposite effect of what you intend. It's not actually providing a compelling argument. It's just making us continue to think you're unhinged. So for me, what's important is, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, it's the contents of your heart. So what is it that you believe in? What do you think of other people? How do you practice your empathy and your love and your caring and your social skills? All of that's what's really important in real life.
Yeah. What my experience, and Richard's no doubt too, that when you're in that zone, there is no connection. There's no coming out. That's all I know. My understanding of God somehow is to say things like that in the hope that, or maybe not in any, maybe they're not hoping that it's going to impact on anyone at all. I've been listening to this stuff for over 30 years, and I seriously, I'm interested in people talking to us, but talk to us as human beings. Forget the labels, forget what you hope that we would understand in what you're saying. Just make a connection with us and cut out the Christian rhetoric. It has no impact on whatsoever.
As a scholar, of someone who knows the Bible really well, what is that? There's a quote, and I'm paraphrasing because I just cannot remember it clearly, that says something along the lines of, a religious person should not be out there proselytizing, actually talking about how religious they are and how pious they are, that in fact that they should practice their belief privately, and not be publicly espousing what they believe in. Is that actually something from the Bible? I'm struggling, but I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm
convinced. There was a story where some sort of religious people of note, they'd go to the temple and pray, and they made sure everybody was watching when they pray. So their sort of pious acts were done for social standing. And Jesus, the story goes that he says, actually, what you should do is when you pray, go into a closet, close the door, pray in there, and let your good works speak for your piety.
Yes.
So obviously, you want to speak about what's true to you, but surely, and I think Rowie was getting at it. Surely, the purpose of speaking to another person is to have a connection. From my point of view, what I want to do most when I'm speaking to somebody is understand them better, and hopefully for them to understand me a bit better.
Yes.
And so
that's what this is.
And so quoting scripture that's a little bit out of context, it's a bit, it's hard to understand whether you're calling us fools or what's going on. And I think Rose, like just don't use that. Connect with us, communicate. Let the good works of your being show before other people through the way you treat and way you talk. And as relationship develops, or in a forum like this, there's certain questions. Answer the questions. Contribute to the conversation rather than lobbing.
Genuine invitation. Genuine invitation.
That is exactly right, Rich. That's one of the things I didn't mention, which is more poignant than anything I said, and that is the discussion we're having tonight is, do you think that the world looks like a world that God has designed, or do you think that there's other things? And what you've said to us, and again, I encourage you, please be a part of what it is that we're doing. I mean, we're not expecting everyone to put perfect posts on and not be critical at all, but talk about what it is we're actually discussing. We branch off into different areas. That's a part of what we do. But what do you think about? Do you think that the earth is clearly to you a design of God with all of its foibles and all of its problems and issues and dangers? Do you think that is what God has created? And if not, when people say, look at this, I've had this argument so many times. Do you think God created? Yeah, look at the trees. Look at the waterfall. Look at all that. I mean, absolutely. But are you prepared to look at the children dead in a little village in Italy because of an earthquake? And little kids were killed, except one little child will be saved. And it's a miracle. God loved the little child.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else died because God didn't care about them. I mean, you've got to broaden your view of what the planet and what the thing is that we live on. It's an extraordinary thing. From what we can gather right now in 2024, according to Brian Cox and Neil deGrasse Tyson and all the experts around the world, there is no evidence whatsoever for any life anywhere else in this universe within our kind of cosmos. I mean, that is extraordinary. Sometimes I'll be driving down the road on a phone going, I'm sitting in my car on a telephone talking to someone. When the hell did all of this come from? We are the only people doing this. This is insane. And I cannot wrap my head around it, and it just fries my brain. I would love, I'd feel so much more comfortable if we found out that planets all doing the same thing and go, cool.
Incredible revelation, Pete. I did exactly the same thing some years ago. I was flying over to the eastern states, and I was thinking to myself, I am 10 kilometers above the ground in a flying chair using the internet to talk to people in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gods. I know it's ridiculous. It's terrible.
How did that come about? But going back as far as we can go back in history and the development. And I mean, people freak out and going, oh, this happened so quickly. Well, it didn't. It happened over millions of years. If you look at it that way, then anything's possible. Time can create the most ridiculous things that we could never, ever imagine. And the time it took for us, if that's what happened, evolution, we don't know, evolved, and suddenly here we are in that jet 10 kilometers above. I don't think we're supposed to be able to understand it. It's just, you cannot wrap your head around it. It's impossible. It's too huge. Just here we are. The fact that we're the only ones is just freaky. It's extraordinary. And we are on an amazing planet. It's a beautiful planet, but it is a hostile planet. It's not perfect. And one would think that if God was going to create a planet for people to live in, it would be beautiful. And you can't come back with the argument, yeah, but we committed a sin and therefore we're all cursed. No, that's not going to work in the slightest. I don't care how Christian you are. That's rubbish. It's crazy.
I know we're getting very close towards the end, Pete. Can I make one recommendation for everyone, including you two, but also all of our viewers this evening as well? There is a very short run series, science fiction series called Devs, D-E-V-S.
Yes, I was going to mention the same thing.
Oh my goodness. That is mind-blowing. Terrible acting. Well, a couple of the actors anyway, terrible acting. But the story itself will explode your head. It is incredible. It's only like 6 or 8 episodes.
8 episodes, yeah.
What's it on Netflix?
Yeah,
I think it is.
Oh, yeah. No, Disney Plus.
Disney. Oh, sorry, we got that.
Yep. When I first watched it, I didn't know anything about it. I was just told, you must watch this. And by the end of the second episode, I was a puddle of water on the ground. It was just unbelievable. I've never seen television that had that effect on me.
What's it about? What does it mean? What's Devs?
Can't really tell you too much without giving away the whole premise.
Okay.
It's well worth watching. And I think both Jason and I are lovers of science fiction. I think some of the new science fiction out, and it's not science fiction. I'd call it speculative imagination.
That's my favorite genre of films, and I'm so over the typical rubbish science fiction stuff that parades as being some breakthrough in science fiction, and it's
this is well worth it.
Apocalyptic stuff.
Yeah,
hey.
no, this show helps you think about the kinds of issues we've been talking about tonight in a very
Especially last
real,
week as well.
tangible way. It's great. Yeah.
I mean, I love a good dystopian film series or whatever.
Doesn't quite reach dystopian, but it could.
That's okay. No, I mean, I hunger for decent stuff. Ever since Star Wars, the original, blew me away in the 70s. I've been searching ever since, and there's been few and far between films that have just captured my imagination. A few, but not many.
You know, what I might do is just quickly wrap up something. I found a paper, and I'll pop it into the chat. It's super interesting. A scientist called Bob Stern, Robert J. Stern, put it in here. Is plate tectonics needed to evolve technological species on exoplanets? Basically, his idea was like, there's so many planets. How can we target more sensibly planets that may have a technological species on it? And looking at our own planet, and it's not that controversial. I think it's probably fairly mundane, the claim that he makes in it, but the idea that a planet needs oceans to produce the kind of life we have. However, if all we had was oceans and no tectonic plates, which means no volcanoes, no earthquakes, no none of those sorts of things, this life would never advance to a certain level. You need continents, plate tectonics, and they say, I'm reading from his little blurb there, maximizes opportunities for speciation and natural selection. And whereas a similar planet without plate tectonics provides fewer such opportunities, basically plate tectonics seems to be the necessary component of a planet to put enough varying pressure on species, breaking apart, pushing things together, to cause that pressure to evolve to a certain point where a technologically capable species can be possible. Without it, it's too safe. And if all you rely on is external forces, that they're just going to wipe out life. Plate tectonics create that pressure without destroying.
That is insane.
Have you
Instability creates life.
Scale?
Sorry?
You've
heard of the Kardashev scale?
No.
Okay, so the Kardashev scale is basically a way of measuring the level of capability of a civilization. So if we look at type 1 civilization, they can access all of the available energy on a particular planet. Type 2, they can take all of the energy of the star that they're part of the solar system in. A type 3 can actually grab all of the energy from a galaxy, and a type 4, of course, pretty much the whole universe. But what they're saying is that if you take a look at the Earth, we're not even really a type 1 Kardashev scale society yet. But the way that you would be able to detect a civilization remotely is if you can measure the output of a star and find that over a period of time it diminishes. It could be because they've built something called a Dyson sphere around that star to capture its energy. Now, can you imagine the technology and the advanced civilization required to be able to build a structure, not necessarily a whole encompassing one, but even a band around a star? But if you could detect that kind of structure because of the way that it changes the energy and the wavelengths that come out of a star, you could detect that from millions of light years away. So that is one way that we might be able to detect other civilizations. With this, even if it was millions of light years away, it's great we've detected it. We can't do anything about it because we can never get there.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to have a great night's sleep. Thanks to you, not.
He's going to be researching Dyson.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Fenton said exoplanet research is fascinating. Absolutely. One of the things that we could keep going. I don't care. I'll talk all night. One of the things that blew me away the other day, I can't remember if it was DeGrasse or whether it was Brian Cox talked about, and I think it was DeGrasse Tyson saying, for those of you that don't know, and I've grew up with this, I've remembered all my life, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. and he said
It's pretty slow.
if we could harness that, hey,
It's pretty slow
yeah,
on a cosmic scale. It's very
as
slow.
fast as God. He said if you could travel to the moon, I think it was like 4 seconds to get to the moon, and then it went through this time thing. I'm like, yeah, okay, 4 seconds to the moon, 16 seconds to the sun or whatever, 24 seconds to Mars. I went, oh my God, we're going to be able to go so far. And it ended up going through like the Milky Way and stuff, and ended up getting to some phenomenal, whether it was millions of years or something, just to get to the unreachable end, and then where we've seen to, which is the edge of the universe, and then continue on. That freaked me out more than anything I've ever heard in my life. That if we wanted to go anywhere at the speed of light,
there are parts of the universe we will never be able to get to. The universe is expanding. It's expanding at the speed of light, right?
Yeah.
So where we are at this point, even if we could travel at the speed of light, we're only matching the rate at which it's expanding. So there are points of the universe that even if we traveled at the same speed of it, we can't go faster than light. So we can never reach that part. But here's a big existential question for you right now. If the universe is expanding in all directions at the same time at the speed of light, and you're over here and he's over here, you two are both expanding away from each other at the speed of light, does that not mean that you're retreating from each other at twice the speed of light? If that's true, you're going faster than the speed of light, away from each other. Boom!
One would negate the other, surely.
I don't know. I wish I knew. All I know is that Brian Cox is a very smart man, and that he used to play the keyboard for a dance band called D-Ream.
Correct. Now, you're just pinching my history there. I'm sure I said that before.
Things can only get better.
That's right. Another comment by Fenton, and by the time we get there, it may be gone already. Look, that's true. If we're able to create a craft, which I can't imagine how we ever would, that could travel at the speed of light, and our destination was planet X, and we were on the way there, back on Earth, they would have, in the time it's taken to get anywhere near it, have created another craft that would go faster than that, and said there'd be this congregation of craft trying to get to the same place at different speeds. It's wow. Very, very scary, gentlemen. Very, very scary.
Well, the Millennium Falcon can do the Kessel run in less than 10 parsecs, so it's all possible.
Exactly.
Anything less than that's just mundane.
As long as you got Chewie to do the navigating, that's the main thing.
That's right. If anyone's got a final question or a comment about our discussion today, please jump on YouTube, which you're already watching, obviously, and let us know what you think. And we're going to wrap it up in a sec. But what I would like to do to finish up, guys, is not a vote, yes or no, but start with you, Rich. Do you honestly believe that the Earth is designed and created by God? And I know that's probably a silly question, but
no, I was going to say, the question put that way, I'd say no. With a little asterisk that would say,
you he'd say no. It's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's a good loaded question. The asterisk would say, yet I still believe in a God that we could still use the word creator. What he has created. What's that?
How do you make it fit if you can look at the Earth and go, well, clearly this is not my understanding of God is blah blah blah. This Earth does not represent what I believe God is. How do you reconcile that with your belief?
So I wouldn't say that. I would say it's not designed as in perfect for humans to run around naked and eat tree, fruit from trees, but not one tree. I would say better picture would imagine I'm baking a cake, and in order for all of the things to happen in that cake to become cake, I need to put it in a really hot oven. Inhospitable, painful. It sends, all the stuff that we know, plate tectonics, earthquakes, all that stuff. If I leave the cake in the nice, pristine bench, it's not going to become cake. It's just going to be doughy batter. It's going to go off. I put it in the oven. I've created the oven not to become the perfect haven for cake, but to be the place that cake becomes cake. We know from science that we need adversity, we need plate tectonics, we need all of these things for a species such as ours to even arise. So Earth is not designed for humans. Earth is the crucible that forms this
You're making up a reason why you think then Earth is just a perfect design by God. Without the oven and without the ingredients, the cake is a failure. And according to what you're saying, that the Earth can be a success because that's the way God's made it. To draw on your analogy of baking a cake, how does that? Is that not kind of making up excuses for God?
Just got to make sure no one leaves the cake out in the rain. That's the main thing.
That's right. It's the song I think.
So long to bake it. And I'll never have that recipe again.
You'll never have that
recipe. Oh, no.
Now that song's
green icing sliding down.
This just degenerates into earworms every time. So yeah, what I'm saying is that this idea that somehow God has formed the earth as it is now as some final product. We know evolution. Evolution is a process that goes from almost nothing, and we don't know where it's going, but it's where we are now. It's produced a technological species, a capable species. And we know for that kind of species to arise, we need a whole lot of uncomfortable situations to grow such a thing. We know personally we need adversity to become genuinely full human beings. And so
you're just fitting it into the whole mess, Rich. Come on.
Well,
you're squeezing it into the unsqueezable, which is to say that the earth is a mess, and somehow you're going to give credit to God for creating an earth we needed in order to flourish.
Come on. So you have to examine the prior beliefs. I have
don't examine stuff, just make shit up.
I have a whole host of reasons why I believe first of all God as a God and as a Jesus Christ as Christianity. I have a whole host of beliefs that sit outside this whole discussion that I bring to it. You have a whole lot of prior reasons why you don't. And so you will make sense of the data of evolution of the in a certain way. Your question was, how can I make sense of it and still remain Christian? That's how I make sense of it. Everybody brings their prior conceptions to it. If all I had was data of evolution, all I could speak about is evolution is a fact. At the moment, I can say evolution is a fact. Yet when I say evolution is a fact in the broader context of my faith, I have to speak about it in a certain way, and that's how I'm speaking about it.
But you're compromising to make it
no,
fit.
not at all. Just the same way as science leaves behind faulty premises when new data comes along. That's how all of my understanding of the world develops. And that's, in some of the best strands of Christianity, you can see the exact same thing happening.
Problem is you can't prove a negative.
Yeah, so the proof of this is not a proof. This is an explanation of how can it be without giving myself a lobotomy.
Yeah.
Is there a point that you get to where you go, I can't buy into any explanation that satisfies my observations of the planet, what it is, and can you conclusively say that the world to you does not represent that which has been designed by the God you acknowledge?
I'm just looking at zeros appearing from somebody testing
Yeah,
their
I saw
comment.
that David Polk the
Oh,
second.
Maybe he's been inspired by the Olympics and he's just scored all three of them.
Well, I did do a double somersault pike in the background, which he may have seen. You guys
missed
didn't
it.
notice it, but another one. David Polk,
Is
please.
this-
The second, explain
It's
yourself.
like, is he
please.
holding up scorecards for how he's feeling about the talk? Zero.
Oh, it's about us.
That's the best case scenario. More likely he's
all-
been listening to us all the time and falling asleep on the keyboard.
We've all scored a 0.
That's right.
Wow.
But to
Which is
answer
fair
the
enough.
question, Rowie, I'll say this. And I think I've said it before. The only real, for me, the only real piece of the world that causes me to seriously hold in contention that that God may not exist is the problem of evil and suffering and pain. Like that is a very hard thing. And anybody who just goes, oh yeah, that's easy to sort out, I've sorted that out, hasn't thought about it, has got something wrong with their empathy. However, there are other things that I look into the world, and a lot of them is my personal experience that has to factor into an explanation of the world. And there's some things that find it very hard to square away with a world without God. So as I was saying, I bring a lot of experience and thinking to this part of the conversation that I can't just go, because if we're going to, evolution has to say something about the world, the world as it is. And I think a lot of Christians haven't really wrestled with it. So they've got some very
Absolutely
things they say about the world. Oh, it's perfectly designed. It's a haven for humanity. It's like, well, not really.
Do you know what the difference is, Rich? It's honesty. That's the difference. If you are totally honest about this, and what I find is and I know dishonesty is a horrible charge. But if you are totally honest about the reality of life and God and what we see and what we experience, you've got to be able to say, okay, I actually can't explain this. Just like science can't explain lots of things, I can't explain this. However, deep in my heart resonates a belief, something that I can't get rid of. I can't dispose of it. I don't want to. It's there. I didn't put it there. I didn't ask it to be there, but it's there. And I totally understand your argument. It kind of, what's the word? And the anticipation is that it may dismantle part of my argument. But what I believe in is not argumentative. It's not something that it's deep inside, and I'm not going to move on it until I have reason to do that. But
that's
the
good.
dishonesty of people who just make up shit just for the sake of it so that they can feel right about what it is that they're doing. We're not here to destroy people's beliefs, to try and upset people or to try and steer them away from the reality. We're putting our totally humanistic views on what it is we're talking about. And what you're talking about is your honesty. And it's not perfect, and it is fallible to a degree. You admit that. But for everyone else that's sort of jumping on board, like David Polk II, who's giving us all 0. Hang on, he's giving us an OP. What the hell's an OP? Fenton jumped in and gave us a 9.5. You don't know if that's out of 10 or out of 100. If it's out of 100, Fenton, be careful, mate. We have feelings too, And somebody else jumped on.
Babogi.
Why be an atheist and brag about it?
Babogi.
Babogi. Why be an atheist and brag about it? I don't recall any of us bragging about being. And for the record, just so that we all understand what an atheist is, it's not a part of a group or a club or whatever. An atheist is simply someone who says, I'm not convinced with the lack of evidence. For me, I'm open to a God.
No one's denying anything.
I was a believer for 25 years. I understand what it's like. I know how it feels. I know what it is. But it disappeared. I can't help that. I didn't do it on purpose. I am an atheist in the sense that I have not seen enough evidence to convince me that there is God. If there is, I'm open to it. Fenton says, I think diversity is more fun.
I think the difference between like an atheist and what I would call a denialist is an atheist is not denying anything. Atheist without theism, without religion, it's
Correct.
not a denial.
No. I have no way of proving that God isn't real, nor would I ever try to do that. What a futile argument.
I remain
so
open.
You don't believe God. Why not believe in Allah?
Huh? Why would I believe in anything?
It's all the same God, isn't it? So you don't believe God?
I believe in love.
It's not about believing Allah, God, Vishnu, the millions of gods around the world, which are maybe just under the umbrella of a one God. Sure, there is no God existed, but there is still Allah you can believe in. How?
I was under the impression that Allah and God were the same deity, weren't they?
Well, I would have thought so. I think there's only one God. People just label it differently.
Isn't it all based on the same root God?
Yeah,
You'd
as
think
far
so.
as yep.
If your argument that there is monotheism, which Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all propose, if there is only one God, there is only one God, and whether you call him God or Allah, you can't be talking about other things. You can only be talking about the same thing, unless you're talking about, the Greek gods, where there's many of them. Then have at it, but you can't have it both ways.
So how do you get
God and Allah are referencing, however imperfectly, the same idea, or there's no such thing as monotheism. You can't have both things.
How do you get to the point where you acknowledge that all the other gods have disappeared? We know there's 33 million Hindu gods, for example. So clearly there's a God for everything in Hinduism. How do you get to the point where you go, okay, there's only one God left we all agree on, and you can call it Allah, I can call it
an
God.
Incredible diamond, Pete. It's the one diamond with multiple facets.
Correct. The Christian corrupted God oneness. We have an incredibly racist politician in this country. She heads a political group called One Nation, and she's famous. One Nation. She's famous for her ignorance and stupidity, and she often says, "Please explain." So, can you please explain the corrupted Christian God oneness? I don't understand what that even.
Yeah. Maybe he's talking about the Trinity. That's my best guess. Yeah.
I don't know, but what I do know, guys, if you just scroll up to when we started tonight at 8:23 down to where we are at 10:05, this has been by far the most incredible podcast. So many people have gone over such a long period of time, and it doesn't look like ending anytime soon. If we can get a comment from what is Al
Ibabogi.
Is that it?
I don't know. But I'm quite impressed with David's comments all night. I mean, clearly there was a part of the conversation where David's like, oh.
And then well, there's a couple of P's in there and an off. So
that's when I was talking about.
Yeah. David went op op.
It's code.
I like to consider myself relatively worldly and experienced and intelligent. And David, look, I don't know whether you're having some fun. Either way, we're enjoying your contributions, and hopefully one day we'll try to understand exactly what OP and OP mean.
Well, I think
keep in mind, David came second. He's the second one.
Sorry, Rich.
I think just the fact that we've got a David Pork II has elevated the status of this podcast. So I, for one, welcome our...
That's two seconds we've had. No, there was a third. There was a guy who was such and such a third who you had to delete because he was just out of control. But David, we're assuming if you're David Pork II, clearly there obviously was a first, and potentially there could be someone in line for the third, which would be.
Oh, they broke the mold. They broke the mold after David.
Really?
Anyway, can we cycle around and close the loop and come back to the whole
Good idea.
premise that we started from?
Yes. Yes, we certainly can. Talk among yourselves for a second.
Well, I just wanted to mention the fact that, because I know you gave Rich an opportunity to actually talk about his idea about whether or not the earth was created by God and so on. And we talked briefly earlier, well, much earlier on, about whether or not the earth is a perfect place for humans and so on. In 1974, there was an astronomer by the name of Brandon Carter. Now, very famous in science circles for the fact that he came up with what is called the anthropic principle. And there's multiple levels to this anthropic principle. Anthropic, of course, referring to humans or humanity. Now, he hypothesized that anthropic coincidences, which is what I guess we can call so many of the things that make the earth so suitable for us, he was saying that that's actually part of the universe's very structure, and that chance has got nothing to do with anything. He said there's two possible things at play here, what he called the weak anthropic principle. And that was basically saying that if the universe wasn't, or Earth at least, wasn't hospitable to life, then we wouldn't be here to actually be wondering about it in the first place. And so in some senses, there's probably no question, there's no reason in even asking why, because the fact is we are here, which means the conditions are appropriate for us to be here. He also talked about the strong anthropic principle, which I really don't gel with at all. But there's a thing, I guess, back in time called the Copernican principle, which states that there's nothing special or privileged about Earth or humanity. He goes on to say that since we live in a universe capable of supporting life, then only life-supporting universes are possible in the first place. I think that's a bit of a stretch for my imagination anyway. But I really do like the idea of this weak anthropic principle. The fact is, as an intelligent living species, the only reason that we are here to ask these questions is because the conditions are right for us to be here to ask these questions. It sounds like a circular argument, but I don't really think it is. In practice, if it wasn't what it is, it wouldn't be what we are. And I know that's a really odd way of saying it. Look, I like my philosophers, and I think to an extent Carter is effectively being a philosopher here as well, but I find it a really compelling argument.
Just for the record, guys, when I disappear, I can hear every single word you're saying, so I heard the whole conversation.
Oh, good. We didn't say anything then, Rich.
Which in some no, I wasn't saying that. In some incidences, hearing everything is not necessarily helpful. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Have you had a stroke, Chase?
Did you put me on mute? I make much more sense.
No. I loved hearing what you said. I'm not sure I totally understand it.
Neither do I. It's just a whole lot of words. Word salad going on there.
Okay, more back to Fenton. I think diversity is more fun. We did that one, the unpronounceable name. So you don't believe God, why not believe in? We did the other thing. Sure, there's no God. Sure, God existed, but there is still Allah. You can believe in the Christian corrupted God oneness. Okay, so we've got two people now who are writing in I don't know, in a way that, I don't know. I can't even bring myself to make a comment about some of the comments on there. Fenton, we'd love Fenton. He makes sense. Nick Bostrom has a great 30-minute
YouTube
video. So we have to make allowances for people who can't type properly on his view of the anthropomorphic principle. I think
this is becoming my favorite thing about this whole chat is the fact that people post these links, which I'm going to thoroughly watch and research this evening. Yeah. Thank you, Fenton.
Yeah.
Are you serious? You're actually going to? Yeah.
I will. I'll follow that up. Definitely.
Absolutely. There's so many great things you can say on this podcast and have an impact, or you can completely and utterly waste our time. 30-minute YouTube. Okay, I will check that as well. Fantastic. Great stuff. I get the sense that even though it's 10:15, I reckon we could probably go till midnight, and I'm not suggesting we should, and there will be people involved, which is fantastic. And it seems a shame to have to cut people off.
Midnight's an artificial construct anyway, so you can ignore that. We'll just keep going until we run out of energy.
Well, I'm retired. So pretty much are you, and Rich is the only one who is gainfully employed, I think.
Yeah.
Are you saying we're bums?
Yes.
You are so right.
Yeah. Well, retirement. Well, you're not officially retired. You're just a bum.
Unemployed. No, not really. Yes, You're right. I'm a lady of leisure.
A lady of leisure. So the question was, to finish up with, which I'm not sure you answered very efficiently there, young Jace, was whether or not the Earth seems to be something that...
He's muted himself again. Probably for the best.
Probably for the best.
I don't touch anything. It must be the way I put my tongue. It just keeps muting. So, as I was saying, before I was so really interrupted, if you can, in a nutshell, tell us whether you think that God, there is a God that has created the earth for us to live in, which is his best effort.
We look at the size of the universe, the amount of suns, the amount of galaxies, the trillions of suns and planets, but on the basis of statistics, there had to be at least one, if not many more, places where the conditions were entirely correct for us to exist. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but it does mean that it allowed for us to come into existence, to be evolved to the point where we can ask these questions. But I don't think for a minute that it means it was designed or created for us or put here by any intelligent hand. I think it is simply a matter of statistics, numbers.
Would it be a problem to you if it was discovered that, in fact, it was proven scientifically that, and the scientists of the world will unite and say that we have discovered that, in fact, this planet, and I'm not talking about the possibility, I'm talking about just go right outside the realm and just say that scientists have now proven that this planet, in fact, was created by God. Would it make
that'd be awesome
to you? It'd be cool.
That would be fantastic. I've said all along that the whole story concept idea of God, I love it. And if it was provable and definable, it would be a game changer. I mean, certainly for me, but obviously for the whole world. If it could be determined that there was a greater power, it would change everything. Everything.
Yeah. Rich, what would that mean to you if that was the same thing?
Like designed as it is right now?
Yes. Well, there was no... Okay, so there's no interruption. There was the Genesis. God created the world and everything in it. And there it is. And it's proven, it's actually factual. Somehow they managed to discover through artificial intelligence that it was actually real. And this planet, would you then not sit back and go, well, couldn't you have done a better job?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say, I'd be far more worried if they could prove that Genesis was the actual way it all happened, because it has a lot of implications about what kind of monster created this place as it is right now.
Okay, so then how does that sit with you? Is it better for you to know that possibly in the back of your mind is that God didn't create this planet, rather than finding out that he did, which would then bring you into a point of question going, okay, wow, why? What were you thinking? Why did you come up with this mess? I've believed in you all my life, and now suddenly I find out that you actually did this voluntarily, consciously.
Yeah, maybe the question there, Pete, isn't so much about whether or not it is the perfect world for us. We're making an assumption there that we the primary creature. God
Okay.
created, if God is real, God created everything. That doesn't make us number one. We're just
Interesting. I
another
like
creature.
that. Yeah, no, it's a good
Yeah.
point. I hadn't thought of that.
That kind of works for me on many levels. But for me, the purpose of creation is not a comfy little house for humans, but the environment necessary to create something that can eventually become God in a very short sentence. And that is the central claim of Christianity. Is the Christianity I believe in is the deification of the cosmos, where, as the New Testament says, that one day God will be all in all. Not just humans get to go to heaven, but the entire project of the cosmos is wrapped up in this God of love. And if that is the end goal, then the home we find ourselves in might not be our end home. It might be the oven needed to create the cake rather than the home
That's
we
right.
get to live in for eternity.
Maybe
I
we're
think
a
that's
step in the process.
a step in the process,
He's back in the bloody kitchen again.
in the kitchen. So yeah, it may not satisfy you, but that's the best I got.
We're not the end of the line. We're not the peak of evolution.
I'll look. I hope not, Jace. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'll be very disappointed.
Yeah,
The best I
yeah.
got was an iPhone.
Fenton says, I blame my callousness from construction, or calluses
Okay.
from construction.
For
What's
his,
that got to do with what you do? Yeah, I know it. Yeah, you're working with his hands. That's no excuse for anything. And Allah is the Lord of worlds. In this world is destroyed. He will just provide another one and replaced with a new creation. Are you by any chance friends with who was that person back there? J.S. Steele 650? Because it's the kind of same. I don't know if you understand what the podcast is about, and the issue we're discussing is purely is the world clearly provable or whatever designed by a God with all of its imperfections. That's what we're talking about. So if you'd like to be a part of that, fabulous. But I think it's probably time to wrap it up, boys and berries. It's 10:22.
that was a great discussion, Rowie, Jace. Really, it was really good. It was really rich.
I didn't think it
You're
was
rich.
going to be.
Put it in there.
Yeah, it just goes to prove we don't need those other people, Luke and Suresh.
We don't need Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or Suresh,
No,
John.
none of
The
those.
brains or the beauty. We didn't need them.
Next Wednesday, we have a it'll be the 14th, I believe, of August. For those of you who don't subscribe to our country or know anything about us, right here in Western Australia, we have our own, obviously, political system. We have a gentleman called David Templeman, who is a lovely man. He is going to be our special guest next week on this podcast. I'm just trying to find some details I can fill you in. He is MLA. He is representing the seat of Mandurah, the leader of the House and Minister for Culture and the Arts, Sport and Recreation, International Education and Heritage. Now, he has a very unusual habit. That is, in Parliament, he likes to sing. He sings amazing songs. He's a very, very talented man. He is a star of stage and screen, as it were. He will no doubt bring a song or two to us next week. He's a very funny guy. He's a lovely man. He's the only man that I've ever known as a politician who I truly admire and trust. He is all quality. He's a lovely guy. He jumped at the chance of coming on. He said, "What's it about? What do you do?" And I said, "We're going to talk about belief." And he went, "Belief?" I said, "Yeah, don't tell me what you believe. I don't want to know. We're going to find out." And he was all for it. He was all over it. He is fantastic.
Awesome.
Also, getting in the future another amazing politician, which is Anne Alley, who is a great local politician as well. She's going to. She was born in Egypt. She has a story to tell. She has a great story. She's a wonderful lady. She's agreed to come on as well. We're just trying to finalize the details about coming on to our podcast. But next Wednesday night at 8:00, David Templeman, MLA, for the Labor Party. He is funny. He is entertaining. Absolutely looking forward to catching up with him as well. Just to finish up, the world is but an illusion and a test for the world to come in the hereafter for those who believe in Allah, the one true God. Whatever your name is, Albaji.
Alpha
Thank you so much for your contributions tonight. I hope that your belief in Allah is true and real and brings you great joy and happiness. I wish you all the very best for the future. We bear no grudges and want no ill of any of the people who are on this podcast, or anyone universally, of course. But to you, thank you so much for being a part. And Fenton, I agree. It was a bitchin' show. I'm off to work. Ha ha. Fenton, just before you go quickly, where do you work? What do you do? Or have we asked that question before? Interested to know what you are. You're a fascinating character, Fenton. We really appreciate your ingredients into this show. Made up the perfect cake to get us back in the kitchen with Rich again. So I think that's where he wants to be, quite frankly. He's a frustrated chef.
That's what I heard.
Just quickly, if you can tell us where you work and what you do, that'd be great. If not, next Wednesday, the 14th, back at 8:00 Australian Western Standard Time from Perth in Western Australia. Construction in Cali.
California.
In California. Okay, construction. Righto. It'd be nice to him.
He works with wood. He works with wood.
Nah, metal.
Nah, wood.
I reckon metal. You reckon metal or wood?
Concrete.
Concrete.
Concrete. Concrete, metal, or wood. Let's see.
Above ground buildings, cranes.
Correct. That's exactly what I thought of. Yeah, come on, mate. Come on. Who's right, Fenton? I reckon metal. Jason said wood or foam or something. And Richard said concrete.
There's like a 30-second delay. So
I know. Take your time. Close.
Tile. He works for tiles.
That's not construction.
Tiling?
That's not construction.
Yes,
that's renovation, wussy boy stuff. That's not real.
Oh, wussy boy. Now we're going Aussie. Mashallah.
Oh, mashallah. Mashallah, brother, peace be upon you, and may Allah bless us all and ease our toils in this. Mate, thank you so much. That's lovely. Yeah, absolutely lovely. Ditto. We don't share the same beliefs, but we do share one thing in common, that is respect and love for one another. And if we don't have that, it doesn't matter how many gods you believe in. That is the most important thing of all. So God love you, mate. Thank you so much.
You do you.
You do you. That's right. And hopefully you can join us again next Wednesday, the 14th at 8:00 Australian Western Standard Time for an atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar with a special guest next week. Apart from the subject, we'll talk to the Honourable David Templeman, MLA. Thank you so much for all of your comments. That is insane. We've gone crazy tonight with all the stuff. It's brilliant. Thanks, Rich. Brilliant. Thanks, Jace.
Thanks, gents.
Yeah, good input. Fantastic. Let's do it again next week. Bye-bye, all. Catch ya. See ya.